However, all this was to change 800,000 years after the appearance of Homo habilis, when a new species of human entered the scene, which changed the course of our entire history, and the history of the world, becoming the first major predator of our species, and the first to leave the cradle of humanity, that is, Africa. And it was Homo erectus. These original people were a breakthrough in many ways. Also, their discovery was a breakthrough, which took place completely by accident, but it overturned a theory that was rooted in the 19th century. At that time, many people believed that humans come from Asia, not Africa, mainly because its geographical location was such a point between America and Europe, offering very suitable routes of migration. Although this theory had no evidence, it inspired many researchers to travel around Asia in search of human remains, and this particular interest aroused Southeast Asia. Unfortunately, an anthropologist actually found human remains in Indonesia on the island of Java. This find is known today as the Javanese man. It was excavated in 1891 and consisted of a fragment of a skull and a fetal bone. The discoverer Dubois was convinced that he had made a breakthrough discovery and quickly tried to convince others that these are the remains of a human-shaped ape walking in a straight position. However, no one believed him, because at that time the knowledge of the early hominins was practically zero, so these remains were forgotten. Until the 20th century, when they were re-examined after discovering many similar remains in China. The Chinese okaz, today known as the Peking man, consisted of teeth and fragments of skulls coming from many individuals. Anthropologists came to the conclusion that both findings belonged to the same species, and most importantly, they understood that these are Homo species, which led to their classification as Homo erectus, i.e., a straight man. This name was later confirmed by more complete findings, which showed that their legs, feet, and spine were adapted to walking and running in a straight position. Many believed that this new species was the oldest Homo walking on two legs, although this is not true. But still, Homo erectus was the first in many aspects of human features. He was the first man who had a flat face, a distinct nose, proportions of limbs similar to modern people, and probably quite rare body hair. This made him strikingly similar to Homo sapiens, although there were also differences between them. First of all, the skeleton outside the skull of Homo erectus was more massive and thicker than that of modern man. Additionally, there were small differences in facial features and gender dimorphism. The difference in size between males and females was much more visible than in Homo sapiens. These differences and similarities can generally be observed in the entire Homo erectus species, but they differ depending on the population. As Homo erectus had surprisingly wide geographical range and a long period of existence, which led to the creation of numerous subspecies, today their number exceeds 27. The remains prove that Homo erectus existed throughout Africa, Asia, and part of Europe, where it clearly preferred caves, rock crevices, and forest areas. Such a wide geographical range aroused great interest, enhanced by the dating of fossils. The oldest of them are about 2 million years old and almost simultaneously appeared in Asia and Africa, which caused a debate about its evolution and migration. For a long time, it was believed that Homo erectus evolved from one of the youngest Australopithecus, or Homo habilis, in Africa, from where it then migrated to Asia and Europe as a result of climate change. However, due to a similar age of bones from Asia and Africa, a 2011 study suggested that Homo erectus evolved from the habilis population living in Asia, and then migrated back to Africa and Europe. This hypothesis has not yet been confirmed, and most scientists still believe that it came from Africa. However, regardless of its accuracy, the study highlights numerous questions related to Homo erectus, and not only the bones are the source of questions. Equally interesting is what was found next to them, especially the bones of medium and large hunting animals, which led to the belief that this species of man was a top predator. This was an amazing breakthrough because, as I mentioned, until the appearance of Homo erectus, people did not occupy the top of the food chain, which meant a long-awaited change. Animal bones were often found in large stashes and came from various representatives of the megafauna population, including rhinos, hippos, cattle, wild boars, deers, horses, and elephants. Even predators that used to feed on earlier people became regular victims of Homo erectus, which is shown in the fossils from Kenya, which showed that the erectus population hunted even crocodiles. Such a difference in hunting and feeding strategies of Homo erectus compared to other people quickly led paleontologists to ask themselves questions. How is it possible? Over the years, research has found many answers that together create a full, beautiful picture. One of the first known reasons was the structure of the body. Homo erectus had a significant increase in size. They were much larger than earlier hominids. Some individuals measured even 1.85 meters in height. However, they were not only tall and slim, they had massively built bodies, and their bones were exceptionally thick, much thicker than those of earlier species. This massiveness gave them a solid posture, which allowed them to survive the hardships of hunting and everyday falls without serious injuries. This solidity of the structure was key, but perhaps an even more important feature of their bodies was their exceptional endurance in terms of effort. Homo erectus, like modern people, had sweat glands, which allowed for effective cooling of the body, and its legs were adapted to running. Footprints show that he was an excellent long-distance runner who used the technique of persistent hunting, which consisted in chasing the prey for so long that it exhausted itself and would no longer be able to escape, often dying of exhaustion or overheating. It is believed that Homo erectus only wounded its prey during the first phase of the attack, which slowed them down during the further chase. These initial wounds were probably caused by another huge advantage of Homo erectus weapons. Complex use of technology compared to earlier hominins was possible thanks to its brain and intelligence. The average brain volume of adult individuals was about 1,030 cubic centimeters, which is almost 80% of the brain size of a modern human. Thanks to this, Homo erectus had the largest relationship of brain size to the body in its time. As a result, he was relatively intelligent and showed complex behaviors that allowed him to create new technologies, so advanced that they initiated a new technological era known as the shell tool industry, which lasted from about 1,950,000 years ago to 130,000 years ago. The most characteristic tools of this period were daggers and primitive axes, which could be used to kill large animals. These tools were also used to grind and dismember the hunted prey, which saved Homo erectus a lot of energy, which, on the other hand, he would have to spend on strengthening with meat, using teeth and hands. Additionally, although there are no direct evidences for this, it is widely believed that Homo erectus also used bows and other weapons used for hunting. The oldest known bow, dated to 400,000 years, indicates signs of an advanced construction, suggesting that more primitive versions of bows could have existed much earlier. The theory of throwing such bullets was additionally supported by the structure of Homo erectus's arms, which was strikingly similar to a human arm, which means that he was able to aim objects with great strength and speed, allowing himself to attack and defend from a fairly safe distance. For other animals, the fact that these monkeys suddenly began to throw objects with precision at them and chase them for tens of kilometers must have been a rather unpleasant surprise. But the nightmare did not end there, because Homo erectus also used intelligence for hunting in groups. It is known about this thanks to 4 stables with traces in Kenya, where a total of 97 footprints were found, belonging to at least 20 individuals. One of these stables was particularly interesting. The size and shape of the traces suggested that they were left by a group consisting only of men, suggesting that it was a typical, specific hunting expedition. This led paleontologists to assume that Homo erectus had a division of work due to sex. Men dealt with finding larger, more risky, and rarer sources of food, while women focused on more reliable resources such as nuts or fruit, thus creating a typical hunting community. However, even though these hunting groups were not always successful, their activity was extremely important. The local extinction of Homo erectus in the Middle East coincided with the extinction of forest elephants, i.e. Paleoloxodon antiquus. However, other local extinctions in Southeast Asia occurred after the extinction of a gigantic turtle, Megaloclus, suggesting that Homo erectus strongly relied on large animals, which makes sense considering that their larger brains and bodies needed a lot more calories. And because their victims were so large, it is often assumed that they had a whole stock of decaying meat, which could lead to the practice of sharing food and perhaps even allowed the first forms of healthcare to appear. This theory was supported by the discovery of specimens that had injuries that made it impossible to survive on their own, including, for example, one older specimen who lost all his teeth due to tooth disease. Normally, such a specimen would die of hunger, But thanks to the culture of sharing food, he could survive by eating soft remains, such as brain or spinal cord. Other signs of primitive care include a boy suffering from serious scoliosis and an adult sick with scoliosis. Both were able to survive for a long time, although they were not able to hunt at all. However, the advantages of having too much food did not end in sharing and primitive care. Homo erectus could probably also conserve food, perhaps by drying or smoking the remains. It was possible because Homo erectus, as the first among humans, mastered one of the most powerful tools in our arsenal to this day, fire. Although the exact date of this discovery is not known, the oldest traces suggest that they used fire consciously at least 1.5 million years ago. It is believed that initially fire was used after natural fires, which Homo erectus maintained for a long time, which indicates the familiarity of free-range materials such as waste. These fireplaces were maintained by people who served as fire guardians and could be moved from place to place, which allowed groups to take fire with them during migration to cooler areas, such as Europe in the Ice Age. Fire, of course, helped to maintain heat, but also had other uses. It was a protection against predators, enabled food preparation, and increased the overall efficiency of this food. Raw products after baking became safer and easier to absorb. You probably prefer baked chicken than raw. For a long time, fire was a rarity among people, but it changed about 400,000 years ago, when these fireplaces associated with Homo erectus became much more common and all over the world, suggesting that they mastered the art of burning fire themselves. The direct benefits of using fire were very significant, but also its indirect effects were important. Fire has become such a source of social integration. Some anthropologists even believe that this element of common presence of fire could contribute to the formation of a primitive language. For a long time, it was believed that Homo erectus was not able to speak because one of the earliest known representatives of this species, a boy from Turkana, did not have adequate respiratory muscles needed to make speech sounds. Later, however, it was discovered that this individual suffered from serious diseases that could affect his respiratory system. Finally, other samples were found that confirmed the possibility of the existence of a basic language. Their respiratory muscles were actually already sufficiently developed. In addition, the parts of the brain responsible for speech and language were similar in size to those of Homo sapiens. And although the nasic bone, responsible for the support of the language and the control of tone and volume, was not sufficiently developed to enable speech at a modern level, it could still support such a proto-language. Regardless of whether Homo erectus was able to speak or not, his way of communication had to be effective in the context of cooperation, which is evidenced by another of his achievements, structural constructions. This achievement outweighs even the oldest known signs of fire. In 1962, in Tanzania, a large circle-shaped structure was discovered 1,700,000 years ago. Composed of volcanic rocks and earth, the structure was seriously damaged, so scientists are not sure of its function. It was suggested that it could be a primitive hut or an artificial shelter from the wind. Fortunately, since then, better preserved structures have been found, including huts and other shelters built of earth, rocks, and branches. Some of these structures seem to be built around fires, which confirms the discovery from Germany 700,000 years ago. It is believed that such structures around fires served as winter camps, allowing Homo erectus to stay in regions that would otherwise be too hospitable for a longer period of time. The flexibility offered by Homo erectus was additionally strengthened by the use of clothing, which, unlike the structure, existed much earlier, as 3 million years ago. These clothes were, of course, very primitive and consisted only of animal skins, but it still greatly compensated for the lack of body hair. It is obvious that Homo erectus was a huge success and was able to spread in large land areas thanks to its numerous advantages. But what is very interesting, even water was not able to protect itself from its expansion. Homo erectus, on the other hand, had one more ability that perhaps surprises paleontologists the most. He was able to sail, although to this day no boats belonging to Homo erectus, we know that he was able to reach many isolated islands, such as Flores, Timor, and Rodi, which were not connected to land by any land bridges, which makes Homo erectus the first sailor in the world. In addition to bones, evidence of the presence of Homo erectus on these islands includes many artifacts, such as tools or fragments of rusted shells. It turns out that these expeditions were a success, and communities were set up on the spot, And it was not just random drifts to the open sea. These findings emphasized not only their ability to build rafts, but also to long-term planning. Such expeditions required months of preparation and incredible logistics. The ability to overcome the seas allowed Homo erectus to avoid getting stuck in certain geographical areas and was probably crucial for its extremely wide range and longevity. Homo erectus was a species that was the most successful in terms of the time it played on this earth. According to the dates, it survived almost 1,900,000 years, and the last known population died only 108,000 years ago. For comparison, Homo sapiens has only existed for about 300,000 years. And the second longest species, Homo habilis, never reached even half of what Homo erectus did, living only for about 600,000 years. This leads to the question, what stopped these dominant representatives of our species? The answer seems to be climate change. Just before their extinction, quite a lot of areas that Homo erectus adored, i.e. forests. At the same time, many of their victims also began to disappear. What's more, the last known individuals lived on Java Island, which then underwent significant environmental changes. Rainforests spread quickly and became much denser. It seems that Homo erectus was limited to this last safe habitat, but when the rainforest turned their way, they were no longer able to survive. And ultimately, this is probably what led to the extinction of the longest living human species in history. Thanks for watching this video to the end. I hope you enjoyed it. If so, I also invite you to watch other videos on this channel, such as our video about Homo habilis, whose life compared to Homo erectus was a real nightmare. Thanks again, and see you soon.